greatest danger to liberty lie in the insidious encroachments by men of zeal, well-meaning but without understanding. And he had it pegged exactly right. The fundamental underpinning of liberty is understanding what liberty is and understanding what the job of the president and those wielding power or exercising power on our behalf are to do. And therefore, if that fundamental understanding is lacking, then all else that follows is going to be diminished as well. And we see that not just procedurally during these debates in which such things, again, as whether one wears a lapel pin or how many cars one has or how many houses one has or who one might have had breakfast or coffee with years ago, those take on an importance far out of balance from the importance of the fundamental issues and the fundamental principles of freedom in America. And we also see that lack of leadership, that vacuum of leadership in many of the issues with which not only this administration has dealt, but succeeding Congresses have had to deal, and presidents, prospective presidents, will have to deal. I think nowhere probably is this more obvious, this vacuum of leadership, than looking at the crisis that certainly is on the mind of virtually all of us over the last couple of weeks, and that is the financial crisis facing us and a number of other nations as well. It's sort of typical of government, modern government, to create or cause a problem, be responsible for a problem, but then not admitting that and using that as the opportunity to then increase government power. We saw this, for example, right after 9/11. All of those steps that the hijackers, the terrorists on 9/11 and in the days preceding that day of infamy, all of the steps that they took, the things that they did and were able to accomplish that led them to the point where they could commit those murderous acts, they were all against the law. I mean, it wasn't that we did not have laws and regulations that could have and should have prevented them from accomplishing all the different steps, from securing driver's licenses that they weren't entitled to overstaying their visas and the government not knowing that or not knowing where they were, being able to take weapons onto aircraft, being able to gain access to secure areas of airports and so forth. The whole laundry list of acts that they were able to accomplish that placed them in those situations on those planes on 9/11 were indeed already unlawful and could have, if certain steps had been taken, prevented them from accomplishing their murderous acts. Yet what happened was, in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, and I sat in on a number of these hearings when I was up in the Congress, what happened was not that we had government agency witnesses that came in and said, we apologize to the American people. You in the Congress have given us plenty of money to have addressed these issues. We have more than enough laws on the books. There are some 4,000 federal criminal laws already on the books, and countless regulations that are to carry out and supplement those criminal laws. We were not using those laws effectively or consistently or interpreting them properly. We made mistakes, and we will do a better job next time. What happened was we had a parade of government witnesses, some of whom were later given high medals, such as the Medal of Freedom, to the former CIA director. And what they said was not that we're responsible, we're sorry, we'll do a better job, but you in the Congress haven't given us enough money and you haven't given us enough laws, you haven't given us enough power. And Congress, true to form, guilt is a terrible thing. What they did is they passed new laws, gave more money to these agencies, instead of going back and figuring out what really went wrong and what is the best way to accomplish the task that was not accomplished prior to 9/11 without increasing the power of government and conversely, necessarily reducing individual liberties. So we wound up with laws that dramatically increased the power of the government to invade our privacy, our financial privacy, for example, our communications privacy, such as we've seen in the recent expansion of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act to spy on American citizens in their own country. And we saw the very same thing. We're seeing the very same thing play itself out in a different arena, but the principle is the same with regard to the current housing crisis. The current housing crisis is largely, not exclusively, but largely the result of bad government policies going back at least about 10 years when Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, those government-sponsored enterprises, or GSEs, decided at the behest of both the Congress and two administrations, the Clinton administration and then the succeeding Bush administration, that it was important from a public policy standpoint to get as many people into houses or to get as many people into a more expensive house as possible. So what happened is Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and some of the other federal and quasi-federal agencies, they started buying up all of this mortgage paper, and that freed up the banks, the mortgage companies themselves, the primary lenders, to lend out more money to more people to buy more houses. And every time they went through that cycle of lending the money out and taking the mortgage paper and then selling that mortgage paper to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac would give them more money. They would be able to let more mortgages. Every time they did that, the risk went up. And sooner or later, and this was written about 10 years ago, I remember an article, and you all might have seen this because it's sort of making the secondary round now. Actually, it may have been 9 years ago. In 1999, a New York Times article, this was not a secret document penned by the Department of Justice. This was a New York Times article. It said, this recently enacted policy by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac at the behest of Congress and the then administration of Bill Clinton to get more and more people into more and more houses at a higher and higher risk is going to be problematic if we ever run into a slight dip or downturn in the economy. And you better watch out. Well, nobody in Washington watched out. What they did is they just went merrily on their way, even in the face of a former director of Fannie Mae, Franklin Raines, back in 2004. Actually, it may have been a year or two leading up to his departure from Fannie Mae in 2004. There was very clear evidence that he had been overseeing a cooking of the books of Fannie Mae that overvalued its assets and undervalued its debt. All of this paper, these mortgage-based securities running to the trillions of dollars that it had amassed. And not only was Franklin Raines allowed to, not only was he not prosecuted for what apparently was fraud, but he was allowed to simply resign from Fannie Mae and for his trouble given a multi-million-dollar golden parachute. Well, so what we have is very similar to what happened both after and then before 9/11, is you had a problem that developed that was largely of the government's own making because of bad policies, inappropriate policies, and then it, as we say in Georgia, and you all probably say here in the Commonwealth also, it came a cropper. The bottom fell out of it. All of this mortgage paper, these mortgage-based securities, the link between them and the value of the assets had been completely lost, if not broken. The bottom fell out of it. And that's what's been happening over the last several months.